Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I'm going to be joined by Asher Lichtman, who is the head of business development at Spotwork. And Spotwork is focused on disrupting the temp agencies as we know them, traditionally in the warehouse and light industrial space. We're going to talk a little bit about how they're doing that and what they're doing to accomplish that, as well as their expansion based in Canada, but expanding into the United States as well, and what's going on with that. But we'll also talk a little bit about the labor market within the warehousing industry in 2025 and what people are seeing, what they're seeing, and what we can expect as well. So, Asher, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Kevin, for having me on. I'm excited to be part of the conversation.
Definitely happy to get you on here, and happy to talk about spot work as well. I mean, I think that one of the top conversations consistently throughout the warehousing industry for the last few years has been labor, labor, labor. So definitely a top of mind discussion always, I will say. But before we kind of dive into that and what the labor market is kind of looking like right now, why don't you tell us just a little bit about spot work for people that aren't familiar?
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, what is spot work? I say it in a very high level answer. We've Uberized the work model.
Mm,
We've given you full visibility and optics into exactly what's going on with the workforce when you need contract, contingent, hourly labor in your business.
mm.
That's what we've done. We've not just thrown people at you. There's a lot of visibility and accountability that's been created through the technology enabled solution that we offer.
Mm. Interesting, and I think we're gonna dive into that a little more, and understand exactly how you're doing that, and some of the differences too. I think between that and some of these other tech providers too, and the traditional temp agency as well. But I guess tell us first, as from your view, and obviously you're dealing with workers and employers, right, on a daily basis through what you're doing. So, as we're here, kind of heading into 2025 and the beginning of 2025, I mean, what really are you seeing as kind of the current state of labor in the warehousing industry? Are we still seeing shortages, challenges? What are you seeing out there?
The shortages and challenges don't seem to go away. They just don't
Yeah,
seem
what's
to.
with people? They're so challenging.
Yeah. And that's why, Kevin, if you heard what I said earlier, we're technology enabled.
Mm,
Because technology can only do so much,
right.
and technology can be incredibly powerful, but we're dealing with people.
Mm,
And people are, I think we can agree, can be interesting and they have their own nuances. And
oh yeah.
that's what we're really finessing in order to create an optimal experience for what I work with the employers, the companies that are looking for the additional hands on deck in their business.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and I think that's very true, right? I mean, people in general are nuanced, as you said, which is like a nice way, I think, to put it, for those that are difficult sometimes to deal with, right? But yeah, I mean, I think there's always that challenge, right? Because with humans, I mean, our minds we're just wired in different ways in some aspects, and something is acceptable to one person is unacceptable to another person, and it just creates for that diverse dynamic, which is I guess great about the human race in general, right? But then also challenging when it comes to getting labor to do what you want them to do sometimes as well. So tell us, I guess, because you sit on both sides essentially, right? I mean, you sit on the employer side, right? You sit on the employee side as well, as you're connecting the two. So well, I'm curious, from because a lot of the discussion I think I typically have around labor is that talking about difficulty in hiring or shortages there, as you mentioned, but also talking about retaining employees too is certainly a challenge as well for those employers. But you guys have an interesting perspective because you also are dealing with those workers themselves. So tell us maybe a little bit on the worker side. What are you hearing from workers that is either lacking in the industry or that they're looking for more? What's challenging on their side as they're trying to find work, or maybe not just find work, but like the right work that they want to do?
What we hear, Kevin, is that a company, that they get asked to go into doesn't necessarily always properly share what in fact the role is. You're called in to pick and pack, and the
Mm,
next thing you may be called in, it can be, sweeping the floors. And they came in under the premise that they were going to be picking and packing, because something happens that's not communicated to them. The container didn't show up. There might have been a challenge over the weekend within the facility, and so they're trying to accommodate based on those unforeseen situations. And naturally, because they've been called in as temporary solution, or the need for those additional hands. So like, what? Sue, Joe, and Bob showed up. What? We wanted them to pick and pack, but this is in fact, and that's where some friction ultimately unlocks and or um, is created, and that's where you get friction.
mm,
They get told one thing and they're asked to do another,
yeah.
and it can be challenging. Some people are more adaptable, some people are more amenable to that, and some just aren't. And that's why what we with our solution are trying to do is ask the companies that need that support, please share the job description with us. And
Mm,
at the same time, we're communicating. We're not just saying, you know, for example, Kevin, go and work at that facility. We communicate. Like I said earlier in the conversation, technology enabled. We
mm,
want to set these workers up for success. You know what, Kevin? By the way, you know what? I know you're being asked to pick and pack. They may possibly ask you to do something else. Is that okay with you? So we're trying to ensure that the experience that is being unlocked and facilitated is optimal.
mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such a great point there because I've certainly experienced that in my career as a warehouse manager where, you bring somebody in and then, you need a little something else done that's maybe below like what they've been brought in to do, but you just need it done. You ask them, and like we talked about humans, right? They feel different ways about different things, and there's like resistance there. I mean, I remember specifically, one employee we had, and he was great, and everybody loved him, right? And there was one day, we just asked him if he could collect some trash and just take it out to the dumpster, and he was very seriously offended, and he lost it, and he walked out actually, which it was unfortunate because it was no intention to be insulting or anything like that. It was just like, hey, we just need a couple extra hands to jump in and clean some things up here, and yeah. So I mean, I think that's a great point there, and it's interesting to hear that feedback too. And I think it is interesting to navigate that dynamic as well because you have for me, it's like, oh, if you ask me to sweep instead of doing something more challenging, and paying me the same thing, I would kind of be like, oh yeah, okay, I'll do that. Like I'll take a couple hours late duty here, or something like that. But some people will be like, no, like I'm not doing that. Like that's beneath me because of whatever society has told us or anything about sweeping or taking out trash, right? So I mean, I think that's really interesting to hear there too, and I think as we look a little bit more at the market, I'm curious because you guys are based in Canada, right? And you are also present in the United States as well, and expanding further in that market. Do you see differences in the labor markets between Canada and the United States, or is it the same? Or
Listen, and markets are larger in the US, naturally, is what
Yeah.
we do. The joke is everything in Canada is 10 times smaller than the US. That's a common theme. And
Okay.
it translates across the US. And yes, absolutely. So if you need, 10 workers in a warehouse in the US, be it in Texas or in Georgia or in Florida. You need two workers in in Canada only because of the warehouse sizes and the
Mm,
volumes. So that is one noticeable differentiator. But at the end of the day, you've got a certain pool of talent that is wanting to be what we call flexible. There's one thing, Kevin, that I have seen,
mm,
and COVID brought about this is that workers want to have the control of their schedule.
mm.
And that's a common theme I'm seeing more and more. The stories of a mom, you know what, who can't get a babysitter,
Right.
okay? But she needs that additional income. And now that there's an opportunity to go and get that additional income with the flexibility of what a solution like Spotwork delivers is something we're seeing on both sides of the border. There's no
Mm,
question. Um, there's certain markets where you know what they say, I've got enough. We're good. There's a good amount of applicants, but there's also what they're finding is the quality. The
mm.
quality of worker is consistently a challenge. That's an ongoing struggle. You mentioned, Kevin, in your days as a warehouse manager. I'm
Yeah.
sure you could tell me stories that I joke why there's no hair in my head. Unfortunately, there's nothing I could pull out anymore.
Mm,
But that's a common thing I hear, Kevin, day in and day out. The quality of worker, the actual worker wanting to perform that job, but at the same time, workers, like I said earlier, wanting to have that flexibility, and that we see on both sides. I have to say to you,
mm.
but the real delta is the size differences of population that
Yeah.
translate north and south of the border.
Mm. Interesting there. Yeah, interesting. And I think that the flexibility has become has become even more of a spotlight on that since COVID and the pandemic, certainly because, more and more people were able to go work remotely, but then the people that are working in the warehouse, like they couldn't work remotely and they're kind of like, hey, why can't I have this flexibility? We got the office inside of the warehouse, and there's like two people in the office. Used to be like 20, and now, but we're all here, like on the floor. I go, why can't we have that flexibility? So I think that's pretty interesting to hear that, and I certainly have heard some of that too, and I think that it makes a huge difference, right? We mentioned shortage in labor, and sometimes if you're not offering that flexibility, that could be causing like some difficulties trying to get employees, right? If you need somebody can only give you 30 hours versus 40, like, you're kind of closing off that market by not being open to that potentially, right? So I guess so. Tell us a little bit more about, kind of give us like a high level overview of spot work, but tell us a little bit more about how it actually works and how it's kind of addressing some of these issues we were talking about
I love that you've hit on a great nugget there that I want to really dive
here.
into there, Kevin. Is we've created a worker pool. When we talk
Mm,
about flexible schedules, Kevin can work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That's what he has, and he's a phenomenal worker. And you've got Sue who can work Thursday, Friday. What we're facilitating with our actual solution is you build that worker pool. So you have that consistent labor, you have that worker that is optimal in the roles that need to get filled, and you won't have that gap. You won't go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and say, "Oh no, Thursday,
mm,
Friday, I've got a hole." No, with the worker pool that you build within your business, you're not having to retrain. You're not having to go to the marketplace to find additional hands on deck. You've got workers that you've vetted, that meet the skill set, that are qualified, that you've trained to fit the needs of said business in order to ensure your KPIs are achieved and ultimately that your workforce is properly controlled. At the same time, you're not having to pay those overtime Because you know
Yeah.
what? If you in an old way, you'd say Monday, Tuesday. Oh no, I could have a gap Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'm gonna have to overtime one Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah.
That falls away. That's one big element of the tool. Another big element, Kevin, is the fact that you've got overview as to who is in. I'm sure you could tell me in your old days, you brought up being a warehouse manager, you call into company X and say, I need, and three people show up, 10 people show up, you know, that's what I hear. Kevin, you might have seen differently or experienced differently. With our tool, you know exactly who is there. It's
Mm.
all geo fenced. It's all radius based. You know exactly who the worker is, what level of experience they've completed through the platform. You're not just getting Kevin and saying, well, wait a second, who is Kevin?
Yeah.
It's all there in the compliance file. So you've got the visibility. You need a forklift operator. The tool's not gonna send out any person who happens to have a heartbeat and can walk
Mm.
into a building. You have to have a forklift license. Now we do not test the workers. That's not a part of our solution, Kevin. We're not we can qualify that they have a license. We do not validate that they are able to operate a forklift. The companies that we work with are doing the testing themselves.
Mm.
That is how the tool is delivering. But ultimately, we're ensuring that qualified, vetted, background checked, screened, and skilled workers are being matched into opportunities. We're not going to give you a worker, for example, you need them in Dallas and the solution's notifying workers that are sitting in Houston or Austin. No,
Yeah.
it's within a 5 to 10 mile radius off a set facility. So that's a big part of what the tool is delivering, the visibility, the scheduling. You
Mm.
can build out your schedule. You can cancel your shifts. You know that things happen within the building, within your volumes, within your demands, and ultimately you flex up and you flex down.
Mm.
So these are key factors of what our solution is doing. But most importantly, that really drives value to companies is that we have the white glove service. Our solution is going to make sure that whatever is communicated through the solution is properly communicated because you speak to someone. The
Mm.
technology, like I said earlier in the conversation, can only go so far. And our people, our team, who's are pretty much available 24/7, are going to ensure that what I'm speaking right to right now is delivered upon.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such an important thing. Because like you said, I mean, there's certainly challenges there and I've experienced them too, where it's, either, like you said, the agency or something is like, yeah, we got 5 people coming in for you, and then 2 show up, right? 1 shows up 2 hours late, right? It's like, the and then you have them where same thing. It's, "Oh, well, what I need is a reach truck driver." They come in and, "Oh, I've never driven that before. I drive the sit down." I'm like, "Well, I didn't need a sit down. I need a reach driver," right? So, I think knowing, right, is like half the battle there, like understanding, what you're actually getting from a labor perspective and a skill set perspective is important. And like you said, I'm sure that the operations, they need to verify that and test, like you said, if it's equipment or something like that, and that makes sense. But you mentioned there a couple of times like vetting these workers. So obviously there's background checks and things like that isn't normal, but how else do you also like vet them to make sure that they are going to show up or they are going to be a reliable worker? I mean, what goes into that process? And maybe that's part of the white glove service that you're talking about.
Great question, Kevin. To create a profile on the app, that's a part of it. Do they have the
Mm.
core competencies to answer, the necessary steps? They're going to go through actual onboarding to create a profile. Are they able to watch the videos, answer the quizzes
Mm.
that are built into the learning management system to ensure that they understand how this tool ultimately navigates? So we are eliminating people as they go through these parts of creating their profile on the solution. We've also got AI baked into our app as well today. That's also ensuring that there is a further verification process of not just getting a bot to complete something. You actually have steps that need to be completed in order to have a profile. And ultimately, from there, should that worker apply to an opportunity when they get notified because they've met that criteria, that's where our team, our community management team, is jumping on and speaking to Kevin or Asher and saying, okay, couple more questions we got to go through here. How many times? What's the last warehouse you worked at? What type of jobs did you complete? Because Kevin, if there's one thing we can agree upon, I joke about it when I'm walking, and through demonstrations, to prospective opportunities. I think resumes today can't always be accurate. I'll leave it there. I don't want to
Yeah,
because you know what? People have stories that blow my mind day in
yeah,
day
that's
out.
a whole nother podcast or 2, I would say, talking about that, yeah.
You couldn't have said it better. And that's why whatever you see the shifts completed is real time.
Mhm,
Real time shift completed that they didn't clock in at 9 o'clock and were gone at 9:15. A shift complete is completing that shift that's posted on the platform that they clocked in at 9 and they finished at 4, for example. Those are all the pieces that the tool is vetting and ensuring that the accuracy of what a worker that is coming into a new opportunity is going to be clearly understanding of to the companies that are looking for those workers. They don't play the guessing game. It's all there.
mm. Yeah, yeah, and I think that's great, and being able to have that visibility, and I think even just the, confidence in the reliability of what you're gonna get, not only from a worker skill set perspective, but just the number of workers that are gonna show up in a sense. Because I know in some scenarios that I was in previously, I mean, we would say we needed 3 people, we would tell the agency like, "Oh, send me 5," because we knew that 5 were not gonna show up, right? So, like, make try and at least get the 3, right? Or even say, like, "Give me 6 or 7," like, to try and get that depending on where we were at. So, I think there's challenges there for sure, but I like that approach, and I think that makes sense, and I like that there's a learning management system that you mentioned in there. So, the learning management system, this is something that the worker is going through. You mentioned, you know, in regards to navigating the app, but is there also things in there that's kind of teaching them about skills in warehouse, for example, or is it like testing them actually to say that if someone's like, yeah, I drive an order selector, I got one right here behind me on the shelf, and that they actually know what an order selector is or something like that. I mean, how does that kind of work?
So great question, Kevin. Your questions are awesome because they're so in line. It's great talking to someone who understands all the elements of how where us
Yeah.
ultimately runs. Yeah, a big part of it is if we offer to companies, if you've got training you want the workers to complete prior to coming in, that's
Mm,
another step. So they'd have to watch videos. It's videos and then quizzes. So it's not just, oh, I completed a module, I hit play, waited, for the 10 minutes for that micro certification to finish. And no, you actually have to go through those steps. You said about how to
mm,
operate, within a warehouse when in the scenario do you go straight, do you stop, do you go, what do you do based on scenario based challenges that are put in front of them. It's goods and manufacturing processes, whatever it might be. We have the necessary training baked into the LMS, and they have to complete every one of them based
mm,
on what the customer has requested within that job requirement in order to be able for them to be eligible for that opportunity. So it doesn't mean because they've completed it, they're going to get it.
Mm,
Someone who might have 40 more shifts in the platform is going to be bumped up the ladder because of the reliability. Because a big part of about is, as we hear it, Kevin, you said it. You ask for three, but you need three, but five show up.
mm,
Five, sorry, five are requested, pardon me. That's another piece that we do. We also have paid backups. We know that there's going to be those gaps. We're not charging a customer for those paid backups. We know that there's certain steps that have to be baked in. That's a part of what our solution needs to deliver in order for the optimal experience to be achieved for the company and for the worker. We
mm,
gamify it for the worker. The worker completes 5 shifts in a row. There's a pay bump. They could get preferred opportunities on the platform. There's a number of elements that we are constantly iterating on in order to ensure that the gaps that you spoke about, you needed three, but you asked for five, are going to be overcome. And again, it's
mm.
not a, I wish it's not a science, Kevin, it's people. And
Yeah.
that's why our community management team, once again, is stepping in every time.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I think that's a great thing, and being able to do that, and having that training like ahead of time too, I think makes a lot of sense. So now you mentioned the creating the worker pool, right? And obviously too, I think if you're in those situations where you have workers that you want them to get some training ahead of time or something, you think about using them more than once essentially. So tell us a little bit about the workers that you have on board. I mean, are they working as like 1099? Are they W-2 through Spotwork? Are they, how does that work? And is the expectation that the operation is going to use them more than once, or is it like a bring them in one day and that's it, or how does that kind of, I guess, work? And I'm sure it's different in different scenarios, but I mean, tell us a little bit about the structure there.
Great question again. So 1099 is what our solution offers.
Okay.
So our those are the worker opportunities that we are helping to support. So those independent contractors.
Mm,
That's point one. Our tool delivers on demand. You need a worker in 2 hours, Kevin. You turn the app on. You need a worker for a project. So you want a 3 week project. You can use a solution like that. So at the same time, when you post that project, there's a button that you actually are clicking on in order to ensure worker must be able to work all days. We're not going to give you a worker that Monday it's Sue and Tuesday it's Bob and Wednesday it's Kevin. No, no, no. That's not what we're looking, because we hear that many a time. That's what companies don't want. And last but not least, we are also offering the temp to hire opportunity.
okay. Mm,
So again, that when you create that job and you post, you're clicking off a box again because algorithms are working to match. So we're not going to give you workers that are looking for flexible opportunities that I spoke about earlier. We're going to give you workers who are looking for a consistent opportunity that could lead to full time. And again, as much as they agree to it through the vetting of the tool and through their nodding that, yes,
mm,
I'm available, our community management team is saying this opportunity could very likely convert after 35, 40 days. That ultimately is what we are offering and ensuring that whatever the needs are of a business are going to be delivered upon.
mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I was curious about that. And that makes sense too. Like you have the flexibility around what the business is looking for there. And I think that's a great thing there. And also, the ability to, as you said, like temp to hire, for the workers, that this is a great, like, testing ground to, or like a proving time, right? To say like, okay, well, bringing some people in, even from an ops perspective too. We used to do that all the time where we just bring in temps, and if one or two were good, then we bring leave them on, and then convert them when there was time to convert them. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Now I'm curious too. I mean, you've talked a little bit about the platform, and some of the things you guys are doing there. Obviously, I think it's no secret that there's a couple platforms out there that are doing similar
Yeah.
things, right? So I guess tell us a little bit about, if somebody's listening, and we've had some of those platforms on the podcast before too as well. So, tell us, if somebody's listening and they're like, oh, this is sounds similar to this or this one. I mean, what makes you guys stand out? What makes you different?
I love that question because I could tell you today, Kevin, we run into that
Yeah.
quite a bit.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Um, and you hit on such a great point. It's the white glove service.
Mm,
Knowing I can give, like this morning, three different examples of us jumping on it, not just taking it in and saying, oh, and I can give you, and I'm not here to disparage or, I'm talking about why. It's the white glove, knowing that there's people to talk to. Technology, as I said in the beginning part of the conversation, I think I've said it a few times, can only go so far. And knowing that there's a person, and it's not a bot, that's not, you're not chatting with someone, you actually can call, you
mm,
can text, you can email, you can do it the old school way to ensure that what I need for my business in these roles is going to be delivered upon. Because what we've heard from what our competitors are doing out there, it's not necessarily the case. And that is why people are willing to give us the
mm,
chance. We don't ask for them, Kevin. Our goal is never go and use Spotwork. What we
mm,
asking for is, would you be open to a test pilot? Would you be open to seeing if this is something that could fit into your current model when you need additional hands on deck? And once that organization sees what we're delivering, I can proudly say that they truly do see an experience that delivers on what I've spoken to so far.
mm. Very nice, very nice. Okay, interesting. Yeah, yeah. I was curious about that, and I think the white glove service is something that is definitely attractive there. So very interesting to talk to you here, Asher, and learn about what you guys are doing at Spotwork, and also kind of what you're seeing in the labor market out there. So if people are interested in getting in touch, maybe doing one of those pilots potentially with you guys, what's the best way to do that and to find out more information?
Well, I'm great on email. I love a good old fashioned phone call. If you want to meet in person, I will do anything to get in front of people because I know it carries a ton of weight. I'm old school. I'm going to tell you, Kevin, anytime to do this, to sit across and have a meaningful dialogue, by all means. I'm just looking for a conversation. So email, I can be reached, like I said, through a phone call. And if it means an in person, by all means, it's never it doesn't it only heightens my excitement.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put that information as well as the Spotwork website at thenewwarehouse.com, as well as in the show notes here, so people can learn more about you guys, and also give Asher an old fashioned phone call too, as well as he said there. So really appreciate you coming on today, Asher, and thank you for your time.
Kevin, you've been awesome. Thank you for having me. It was a wonderful, wonderful conversation.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, the New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesaresexy.com and get your own.